What's up guys, so with The Force Awakens upon us, I thought I would update my Canon video, seeing as since my last one a lot of great new content has been added. So I'm going to go through every piece of new content that has been added in the last 6 to 8 months. As of April 25th, 2014, the expanded universe of Star Wars came under the Legends banner, moving it out of continuity and out of canon to allow the creation of a new universe to be made, beginning with the new trilogy of films. Anything made before this date is not canon. This includes the currently running MMORPG The Old Republic and its recent expansions. During this video you will see certain numbers and letters such as 32 ABY or 3 BBY. ABY stands for After the Battle of Yavin and encompasses everything taking place after A New Hope. BBY means Before the Battle of Yavin and includes events such as the Clone Wars and Rise of the Empire. So without further ado, let's get into the new canon of the Star Wars universe. So jumping straight into it, we have the first film in the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace. This takes place at 32 years before the Battle of Yavin and shows us the life of Anakin Skywalker as a child, as well as the Jedi at the height of their power and the resurgence of the Sith, thanks to Chancellor Palpatine and Darth Sidious and Darth Maul. Of course, not many fans very much like this film. I'm particularly one of them, though it isn't as bad as the second prequel, Attack of the Clones, which I'll get to in a minute. Next up we have the comic series ObiWan and Anakin. Not much is really known about this series. This will be the first comic book ongoing series to start in 2016, and it'll chronicle the training of Anakin as a Padawan learner under Obi-Wan Kenobi. We've seen some pages of it, and it's obviously going to be Anakin and Obi-Wan going on Jedi sanctioned missions throughout the universe and getting into trouble and stuff like that, and sort of just filling in the backstory between episodes 1 and episodes 2. Up next we have Attack of the Clones. Now this one is the prequel that I don't particularly like that much, mainly because it's more obnoxious than the first one. It's, big, more, seizure-inducing battles when there's no need to be. We have the Yoda, who before all this happened, he was like this wise old wizard sage guy who'd give you advice when you're training in the Force. He's suddenly like this guy who can like little frog who can jump around and do all these amazing lightsaber battles and everything, and it just looks really dated as well with the CGI. They plastered over everything, even going so far as replacing whole actors and just substituting them for CG models. Coming up after that, we have the Clone Wars movie and Clone Wars TV series. Now this one is really cool because this is one of the few things that actually carried over from the Disney acquisition and expanded universe. They incorporated this in to sort of fill the gaps between episode 2 and 3, which is really cool. And Clone Wars series is actually really damn good. I really love it, especially the later seasons when it started getting a little bit more darker and started sort of dealing with the tragedies of the Clone Wars and everything, and ultimately ending with Jedis leaving the Jedi Order because of the war and everything. It's a really great series. After the Clone Wars series finished up and was cancelled, they released some stuff called the Clone Wars Legacy, which is basically all the episodes that really didn't get released, and some of them got released in book form, such as Star Wars Dark Disciple, which sort of wraps up Asajj Ventress's story and sees her actually die at the end of that story, and includes one of my favourite Jedi, Quinlan Vos, as her sort of love interest partner sort of thing. The other thing is the only Dark Horse comic series to be carried over from the Disney acquisition, and that is Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. This sort of wraps up the tail end of the season 5 arc. We saw Darth Maul sort of rise to power with the criminal gangs and everything, and he actually gets captured by Emperor Palpatine and tortured, and then he gets released and everything, and so he's still left alive after this, after we see Mother Talzin die and everything, so we don't really know what his whereabouts are. There were also a bunch of unreleased, unfinished episodes that got released in animatic and raw animation footage form on the StarWars.com website. There's, I think, 2 or 3 storylines, and they're actually really cool. They involve some clones, as well as the planet Utapau, which we'll later see in episode 3. Speaking of episode 3, coming up next we have episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now this is my favourite of the prequels. It's a lot darker than the other ones, and sort of what it should have been from the get-go. It should have been only 2 episodes, and this should have been the second part with, the rise of the Empire and everything. Coming up next, we have Kanan the Last Padawan. This is a Marvel comic book series written by Greg Weisman, who also wrote the first season of Star Wars Rebels, which this comic is based on. The comic follows the life of Kanan Jarrus, or Caleb Doom as he was known before he took the name Kanan Jarrus, to escape the Empire and Order 66. This is a great little comic from Greg Weisman, detailing a little bit of backstory about the characters of the Star Wars Rebels TV show, and obviously it's mainly about Kanan and everything. We get a little bit about him escaping Order 66, and a little bit about his time as a Jedi before Order 66 happened, since he became a Jedi Padawan right near the tail end of the Clone Wars, so he didn't really get a lot of formal training before his master was killed. Next up, we have Star Wars Lords of the Sith. This was one of the first new canon books to be released once the Disney acquisition went through, and it details the story of the planet Ryloth and a sort of slave labor sort of revolt that was happening when Cham Syndulla, the character from the Clone Wars and father of Hera Syndulla from Rebels, sort of led this resistance against the Empire, and it led to Darth Vader and the Emperor actually going to this planet and getting sort of stranded, and them sort of wiping out a lot of the populace. And this was a really great novel, since it showed sort of the control Palpatine now had over Vader, and like Vader sort of having to do what his master ordered, you know, the whole dark side sort of thing. A really cool novel. I really enjoyed this one. Taking place a couple of years after that is Tarkin. This book details the rise to power of Wilhuff Tarkin and his rise through the Imperial ranks. It also deals with him having to deal with some guerrilla forces, sort of resistance forces, and newfound evidence of growing separatist conspiracies and stuff like that. And he's got to sort of stop them before they can do any damage to the Empire. And Darth Vader is involved as sort of like an enforcer for the Emperor and has to work with Tarkin, and that's sort of how their relationship builds to the one we see in A New Hope. This was a pretty good little book. It gave us a little bit more introspection into Grand Moff Tarkin, and we've seen him, he got introduced as well in Clone Wars, and we saw him in Clone Wars as a Republic soldier, a Republic commander and everything, and we sort of see his rise through the Imperial ranks and how he became a Grand Moff. Next up, we have Star Wars A New Dawn. This book is interesting because it involved the first meeting of Kanan and Hera from Rebels, and the first time they sort of met and teamed up to stop some Empire and some, you know, really bad stuff happening and everything, which was really cool. It was a nice little prequel to the Rebels TV series. It showed how their relationship is built, since when the show started, there was obviously, you could see there was some type of relationship there, whether it be romantic or just like friendly partnership sort of thing. It's hinted again in this book as well, which is really great, and gave us a little bit more backstory on like Kanan and more about Hera, who's still a little bit more mysterious, and we know her father is going to be appearing in the show, and her father was in Lords of the Sith and everything, so they're really ingrained with the whole rebellion and the Empire and everything, so that's really cool. Preceding that is Star Wars Rebels, the first new canon TV show from Disney, from the creators of the Clone Wars, David Filoni. Damn, it's a good show. It's really damn good. It's just finishing up its second season. It's halfway through its second season. It's absolutely amazing. You know, we're getting characters from the Clone Wars. We've got Hondo, we've got an Ahsoka now joining the team. Really cool stuff happening there, and sort of seeing like as the first episode is called, the Sparks of Rebellion. We're seeing how the Rebel Alliance is sort of formed, and how all these different sects are going to come together to form the Rebel Alliance we see in the films and start the whole galactic civil war. Next is a movie that actually hasn't been made yet, and won't be for a little bit yet, since they're actually already just casting now, and that's the Han Solo spin-off film. We don't really know a lot about this, other than it will take place obviously before A New Hope and detail the life of a young Han Solo. Now this movie could go either way. It could be really good or it could be really bad, and it really depends on who they actually get as Han, since, you know, Harrison Ford made that character. Like, Han Solo is Harrison Ford and Harrison Ford is Han Solo, you know, you can't really have one without the other. So it's going to be really a hard task to sort of mimic, you know, Harrison's, you know, cocky arrogantness, smugness, sort of roguish demeanor as Han Solo, but also create something new. So it's going to be really challenging, and I'm really interested to see how they exactly pull it off. Next up we have Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Not much is really known about this, even though we've seen some pictures and there was a brief teaser shown at Celebration Anaheim this year. We know it's based after Revenge of the Sith and before A New Hope, and deals with a group of rebels trying to steal the Death Star plans, and somehow Darth Vader might be getting involved, but according to the director Gareth Edwards, there's not going to be any Jedi and it's just going to be Star Wars. It's going to be wars and all the people around them, there's no Jedi to help them or anything, so it's just going to be the ground, gritty and down to earth sort of Star Wars stuff that I guess you could akin it to Band of Brothers or the Pacific, something similar to that. And we've seen set photos, and there's been set photos of like a beach planet with stormtroopers and rebel insurgents fighting each other, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I imagine we'll be getting a teaser very soon. Next up we have a movie that needs no introduction, Star Wars A New Hope. Before this movie became Episode 4 A New Hope, it was just called Star Wars, and before that it was originally a Flash Gordon movie. George Lucas originally wanted to try and get hold of the rights to create a Flash Gordon movie, since he really loved the 1950s and 60s serials that he grew up with, but unfortunately he couldn't secure the rights, so instead he had to make his own, and the result was Star Wars. And you can see the parallels in this and Flash Gordon, as well as like some serials from like the 40s, 50s and 60s, and very much influenced by them, and other things went on to be influenced by Star Wars, so it's really kind of cool to see that sort of grow, and how one thing that was influenced by another is now influencing a myriad of different things. Next we have the Princess Leia mini-series from Mark Waid. This takes place immediately after episode 4 and sees Princess Leia traveling throughout the galaxy with her friend Evan and R2, looking for refugees from Alderaan and trying to set up a new Alderaan planet. And she is successful, but the Empire do get involved and try and hamper her goals into creating a new Alderaan. But eventually she does create a new Alderaan, and I gotta say it was a pretty cool series. I'm kind of upset that it was only a short mini-series. I would have liked to have seen it gone on to maybe a small ongoing, like a 10 issue or something. It was really interesting. I hope we get another sort of series like this one. The next Marvel miniseries is Chewbacca, which is a 5-issue miniseries that, as of recording this, actually hasn't finished. It still has one more issue left, and it sees Chewbacca helping out a small planet free their populace from slavers and the Empire, and generally being a rebel, basically. It's a pretty cool series. It's a really funny series as well. Jerry Duggan knows how to write a really funny character who can't actually talk in English, which is really interesting. So Phil Noto's art has to sort of express what Chewbacca's saying, and does a really damn good job of it, and it's a really damn good series. Next up is the main ongoing Star Wars book. This is really a really great book. It details the events between episodes 4 and 5 as the rebels sort of go about their, rebel stuff, doing missions as well as trying to find a new base. Luke confronting Vader, and Vader actually finding out that Luke is his son before he finds out in The Empire Strikes Back. So it sort of builds on that, like Vader already knew that and was holding it against the Emperor and everything, and it's a damn good book. At the moment they're actually in an event called Vader Down, which sees all the rebel fleet going after Vader as he is trapped on a planet. We also see Luke going through Jedi teachings. He's found Obi-Wan Kenobi's journal, as well as being trapped by a Hutt who had access to loads of Jedi artifacts, and he's sort of teaching himself to become a Jedi, and he's looking for loads of Jedi temples to sort of find different teachings to sort of help him become a better Jedi. Definitely a really damn good book. Running concurrently with the main Star Wars book is Darth Vader, another Marvel comic that centers around the Dark Lord of the Sith. This, as I said before, just runs parallel to the main Star Wars book. Sometimes they intersect like they did in early issues, as well as now Vader Down. And it's a really damn good book. I gotta say, they really paint Vader as this no-nonsense guy who gets shit done basically for the Empire. It's really damn good book. It's action-packed. It's kind of suspenseful as well, because he finds out Luke is his son before Empire Strikes Back, so he's doing all this subterfuge and everything, sort of going behind the Emperor's back with this woman named Dr. Aphra, and like stealing stuff from the Empire to sort of build his own little army and everything. And there's like new cyborgs that are meant to be replacing Vader being brought in and everything, and he's got to try and prove to his master that he is worthy and these guys aren't. So it's a really damn good book. I'm really enjoying this, and at the moment of course they're crossing over with the Vader Down series with the main book, so it's getting really action packed. Next up, we have Heir to the Jedi, and one of the first novels written for the new canon. It takes place between episodes 4 and 5 and sees Luke go on a mission for Admiral Akbar and Princess Leia to rescue an alien cryptographer from the Empire. This is also notable for Luke's sort of finding out a little bit more about his Jedi heritage and becoming a Jedi. And one part which is really interesting is he actually finds an ancient lightsaber, which a lot of people speculated to be either Kylo Ren's or eventually become Kylo Ren's, or related to Kylo Ren's in some way, like the same type. Unfortunately, it's not, since this one actually had, I think, 3 crystals in it to focus out the 3 blades, but Kylo Ren's actually only has 1, and it focuses at 3 blades because his crystal in his lightsaber is actually cracked, so it's unstable, and those 2 crossguard beams are actually heat exhausts from the unstable blade. But yeah, it was a pretty good book. I really enjoyed it. After that, we have Star Wars: The Weapon of a Jedi. This is a really weird one because it was bookended by scenes that actually take place just before The Force Awakens, and in this book it sees Luke going to a planet and sort of finding a Jedi temple and sort of teaching himself the ways of a Jedi and how to like use a lightsaber and stuff. And it's notable for having one of the aliens from The Force Awakens, Sarko Plank, who actually helps Luke and then sort of betrays him to the Empire, and Luke actually has to fight him. And the guy actually puts up quite a big fight against Luke, though in his defense Luke is still learning how to use a lightsaber. But it was a pretty good book. It was written by Jason Fry, who's really big with the Star Wars books. He's written countless books, some I think visual dictionaries and like ones that sort of detail the galaxy and everything, so he knows what he's talking about when he's writing these characters. Next is Battlefront Twilight Company. Now this one's a little bit weird because it takes place over a long spanning time period between episodes 3 and episode 6 into like the Battle of Jakku and stuff, but it follows the people of the 61st Mobile Infantry, who are better known as Twilight Company, and they're like a sort of hardened members of this renegade outfit, and they do all these like missions for the rebels and stuff. And it's a really great insight into, you know, the run-of-the-mill blue-collar rebel fighter, you know, someone who's not a Jedi or like a general or, you know, one of these main players who we see in the movies. It's really great, and I hope this is what Rogue One does, sort of just makes it about the people who are actually rebels and think they're fighting for the right cause, and same with the Empire. But yeah, it was a great look at these average Joe rebel fighters. Next we have the Marvel Comics Lando Limited series. This was a 5-issue series written by Charles Soule that detailed Lando's exploits as a thief and sort of like a dashing scoundrel, and in this one he actually steals Emperor Palpatine's personal ship, which is full of Sith artifacts that affect his crew and end up turning some of his crew against him, and they actually end up killing the rest of his crew until only him and Lobot are alive, and they get rescued by this bounty hunter who is actually sent by the Emperor after them. Lando happens to know her, of course he does. They sort of all just escape. What was really cool about this is it showed how Lobot was before he became like this autonomous robot that we saw in Empire Strikes Back. Before that he was like kind of just like Lando, you know, they called each other brother, and he was like had quippy jokes and stuff, and he let his programming, which was that weird band he wears around the top of his head, sort of take over, and that's why he's sort of all robotic and everything. And it was great. They really painted it as this really tragic story between 2 friends, and it was really great. And I do wish we got a little bit more of like when exactly this takes place in the timeline, but we know it is before Empire Strikes Back, since he doesn't own Cloud City, and it's implied by Lobot at the end that Lando's going to go buy it or like make something of himself, so I guess that's why he goes off and like gets hold of Cloud City and becomes the administrator. But yeah, really great book. Coming up next we have Smuggler's Run, a Han Solo and Chewbacca adventure, which is the same series as the Luke Skywalker Weapon of the Jedi story, and again it's bookended by scenes that take place near The Force Awakens, and this one sees Han and Chewie going on a mission for the rebellion, and they have to dodge like bounty hunters and spies and everything, and this includes one woman who I'm theorizing that she might actually be Captain Phasma, and this is solely based off what she looks like in this book and in the small animated short that was made for this book. I'm only saying this because she mainly looks like Gwendolyn Christie, except with like a weird cyborg eye. That character's name is Lisa Beck, and this isn't actually the first time she's appeared. She appeared in this as well as Shattered Empire issue 4, and in that she's thought dead, and they don't know whether she is actually dead or not. And yeah, it could actually be her, since she was part of the old Empire. She was a ISB agent, and I could see her being Captain Phasma, like sort of just getting out of everything, then coming back with the First Order. It would be really interesting to see that, since we've actually seen characters who were in books before the movie actually come into the movies, as in episode 7. I'll get to that when I talk about them later on. But yeah, it was a nice little book, and again, as I said, if you don't want to actually read the book, I think the Han Solo one, the Luke one, and the Leia one that are in this series, I think they all got made into shorts. I know the Luke and Han one did. Yeah, they're little animated shorts that basically tell the story, and they're really interesting, really cool. And it was cool because they're actually written by comic writers as well. This one was written by Greg Rucka, and I think the Leia one was written by Greg Rucka as well, so really cool. Next is my favorite movie in the Star Wars saga, Empire Strikes Back. This, I don't think, will ever be topped by any other movie, even though Force Awakens does come very close. But yeah, it won't ever be topped, and there's not really much to say about it that hasn't already been said. It's a great damn movie, it's really quotable. It's one of the biggest movies that has affected pop culture in I don't know how many years, like 30, 40 years, however long pop culture has been really relevant. You know, the whole, no, I am your father line, that's quoted and misquoted very often across every medium ever made, like music, movies, comic books, games, books, everything, Not really much to say about it, except it's a damn good movie. Next up, we have Star Wars Moving Target, a Princess Leia adventure. This was another book that went along with the Luke and Han one for the Journey of the Force Awakens, and it's pretty cool. It sees Leia leading a group of rebels on a decoy mission against the evil Empire. It's really cool because we get characters like Nine Nub in it and everything, and what's even cooler is that the beginning of the novel takes place roughly just before the Force Awakens starts, since Leia's talking about Poe and sending Poe on a mission to Jakku, and she really talks up Poe, as Poe is seen as this really patriotic member of the Resistance and of the Rebellion, and he's basically like the Captain America. He's really patriotic of the cause and everything, and I think that's really cool. That is what we kind of see in the movie as well. But yeah, really cool book, gives us a little bit more about Princess Leia that the Princess Leia comic did as well. Next up, we have Return of the Jedi. This, now that The Force Awakens is out, is my third favorite Star Wars film, and I know why people don't like it, because of like the Ewoks and everything, and it was starting to go into prequel territory, but I really like it, especially like the last probably 30-40 minutes of it, once we get to the Battle of Endor and everything, and we have Luke sort of like with a showdown against his father and Palpatine, and just that lightsaber battle. Mate, it's my second favorite lightsaber battle after the Empire Strikes Back one. Really damn cool. I really like it, and yeah, I can see why people don't like it, but it's not as bad as the prequels. But it's really cool. I really like it. Immediately following on after that, we have Star Wars Shattered Empire. This was a 4-issue mini-series that got released just before The Force Awakens came out, and sort of details the immediate after effects of the Battle of Endor. Like, literally in the Battle of Endor, we see the ships flying around, and the main characters are actually Poe Dameron's parents, and we see them sort of aiding Han, Luke, and Leia on different missions. We see Poe Dameron's father, who was part of the Pathfinder team that was actually down on Endor to blow up the shield generator. We see him helping Han Solo with all these different bases, while Poe's mother, Shara, was actually a A-Wing pilot during the Battle of Endor, and she comes like a pilot for Leia, and they go to Naboo and sort of deal with the Queen on there and sort of get her help in sort of re-establishing the New Republic. And then she goes with Luke to sort of take over these Force trees that the Emperor had taken from the Jedi Temple. She gets given one of the Force trees to plant on Yavin 4, where she retires with her husband to have Poe and everything. So yeah, really cool to sort of get that little bit of history about Poe, and that his parents were ingrained in the rebellion, which is why he fights for the rebellion as well, which is really cool, really neat little tie-in and everything. Next, we have the Star Wars C-3PO special one-shot issue. In this issue, we apparently find out why C-3PO has a red arm in The Force Awakens. This isn't actually out yet. I originally think it was meant to be out in December, but I think it might have gotten pushed back for some reason, maybe writing or art issues. It is now coming out sometime in February, so keep an eye out for that. After that, we have Star Wars Aftermath, and this takes place in the months and years following on from the Battle of Endor, and just showing us how the galaxy is reacting to the Empire being defeated and the rebels sort of trying to establish the new republic. And it's got some really interesting tidbits, like we know the Emperor sent out some colonies and some ships and stuff out to the unknown regions of space because he sensed something was coming from the dark side in there, like the source of the dark side. And my theory is that's where Snoke was, and we know that from the unknown regions come the First Order, so he's probably taken over those colonies that Palpatine sent and made the First Order and everything. So it's really interesting to see that. And we also have a cult that's after Darth Vader's lightsaber, since they wish to destroy it so that their deity, their god Darth Vader, actually has his weapon in the afterlife so he can continue his mission, which is really cool. And obviously it's implied that the lightsaber the guy has isn't Darth Vader's, or it might be, and we're not really too sure since obviously it blew up in the Death Star. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And we also get a bit of Boba Fett, like kind of like a reference to Boba Fett's armor, since someone found the acid washed armor out in the desert and is actually trying to sell it. But yeah, pretty cool book. And it also includes a character named Snap Wexley, who is played by Greg Grunberg in The Force Awakens. So it's a nice little tidbit. And also in this, I think we get Jessica Pava, who is in, I think, the Luke Skywalker young adult novel, Weapon of the Jedi, who is actually also in The Force Awakens as a pilot in Black Squadron. So that's really neat that they're sort of adding characters from these new books into the movies. Next up, we have The Perfect Weapon, which was one of, I think, 5 short stories that were compiled into a book just before The Force Awakens got released. This story deals with Bazine Natal, which is the woman who alerts the First Order in Maz Kanata's bar of Finn and Rey's appearance. And in this, she has to steal a case from an ex-stormtrooper and give it back to her client, who's this mysterious guy who talks through protocol droids and stuff. And it's really cool. Look at the universe of, 30 years into the future from Return of the Jedi, and like what exactly is happening and what people are up to and everything. And it's really interesting because there's like ex-stormtrooper, like old folks' homes and stuff, and that's what she has to sort of get into and sort of get this case and everything. And it's cool. Look at this character who just appears in the movie just for a couple of seconds, so it's really cool that they've given her a little bit of a backstory. Next, we have The Crimson Corsair and the Lost Treasure of Count Dooku. This was another short story in the same book as The Perfect Weapon, and finds that all these different pirates are going after a crashed ship that had a lost treasure of Count Dooku, and it deals with Captain Ithano and his crew sort of getting this treasure, which apparently is a clone trooper, one who was seen last in the Clone Wars. And the reason he is been put into cryo sleep is that he was triggered by the Order 66 prematurely, so they had to sort of get rid of him. And I think they were doing like tests on him to figure out why this was happening, since this actually happened before in, I think, season 6 of the Clone Wars, when one trooper inadvertently caused his Order 66 programming to start up prematurely and he ended up dying. So pretty cool that they're sort of harkening back to that. Next is High Noon on Jakku, and sees Constable Zavuo, a character who was actually in The Force Awakens, but he was cut from the release of the film, deal with a renegade droid on the planet and in Nima Outpost and everything. Pretty cool look at Jakku before we see The Force Awakens, and we see that's really just like a junkyard with people just arriving just to like salvage the junk from the crashed Star Destroyers and all these different crashed ships. So it was really neat to get a look at the planet beforehand and just get a lay of the land before we went and saw the movie. Next was The Face of Evil, and this was really interesting since it was sort of like a horror story, and it was set in Maz Kanata's castle as a thief sort of stumbles upon these like Frankenstein and Igor like guys who are sort of bringing people back to life with their like creations and everything. And really great horror in this. It's not the scary type of horror, it's like the horror of like all this like stuff that could happen in the galaxy with like the science and everything that they have. Really cool look at Takodana and Maz Kanata's castle and the people in the castle as well. The last short story is All Creatures Great and Small, and deals with that puppet we saw in the Force Will Change video and in the movie Force Awakens, Baba Joe, the weird like camel looking creature with all the creatures on his back. And it's him basically telling a story to calm all these villagers on Jakku, and he tells a story about how he helped destroy the Death Star and everything. And it's really great because like you could see something like that happen, but obviously he's like just telling this story just to sort of captivate the villagers and everything and get them listening to him. But yeah, it was a really cool, fun story. It's kind of Really cool to read, like this guy wandering around with all these little birds and stuff that he has on his back to help destroy the Death Star. And it just so happened, Luke shot the proton torpedoes just at that exact moment, and when he was destroying the Death Star at the same time. Really great little things like that. Next, we have the newest addition to the Star Wars canon, which is Before the Awakening, which was a book that was released, I think, the same day The Force Awakens was released worldwide. And it's just 3 stories about Finn, Rey, and Poe, and they're broken up into different chapters. And the Finn one is about him a couple of weeks before the opening of Force Awakens when he arrives on Jakku, and he's painted as like the best First Order soldier the First Order has ever had. He's at the top 1% of his class, but he doesn't like killing. He doesn't like what he's become, and him and Captain Phasma sort of butt heads a little bit, but he has to be under her command, so he has to listen to that. And then the end goes to him boarding the Star Destroyer and getting ready to go to Jakku. The Rey one was actually really cool. It was her finding this ship buried in the desert, and she basically repairs it, and it's her dreams of like basically selling it to Unkar Plutt for like all these rations and like choice of scrap metal and everything, so she can basically live, and it's basically like her like unicorn basically. And she gets help from all these people, and Tito's try to take the ship, and eventually they get the ship running and take it into Nema port. And the people that help her take the ship from her and leave the planet, since she didn't want to leave the planet because she's waiting for her parents and her family. And yeah, it's kind of upsetting, but also kind of cool that this happened just before The Force Awakens. The Poe one is really cool as well. It's him sort of rescuing a trading ship from the First Order, and we get a look at like his Red Squadron and Rapier Squadron and how they all sort of act and everything. And what's great is there's different maneuvers named after personal heroes from the First Galactic War. So there's like a Skywalker maneuver. There's even a Jack Porkins maneuver, the Belly Run I think it's called. There's a Wedge Antilles one. So it's really cool that they're sort of idolizing those pilots of the rebellion, in like they've made moves about them and everything, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, I'm really glad we got a little bit more Poe. I didn't think we got a lot of him in the movie, and I really like his character. Then up next we have the last bit of new canon, which is The Force Awakens, just released. Absolutely fantastic film. Go check out my review. I don't know what to say about it. This is a damn good film. I've seen it a couple of times now, and it's up there with Empire. It's probably my second favorite Star Wars film at the moment. It's really great film. There are lots of really cool stuff, and as I said just before, Poe was my favorite character. I did think we didn't get a lot of him in the film, since he was that character who was actually meant to die, and we all know that Han Solo actually died. But it was a really cool film, a really happy and delightful film. So yeah, that's it for the new canon. I guess in like 6 months or so I'll do another one when we've got a little bit more info about Rogue One, plus more comics and books and everything. But yeah, keep an eye out for all this new content that's coming out. It's really easy to follow it at the moment. You can really get into it at the moment, but in a couple of months I imagine it's going to be pretty heavy. So yeah, get into it while you can, folks. But yeah, thanks for listening.